Namaskar and a very warm welcome. You're watching Vantage. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Canada's inaction against Khalistanis is hurting its relationship with India again. Today, a parade where the assassination of Indira Gandhi was celebrated is being widely condemned in India. India's External Affairs Minister says these provocations are a result of vote bank politics. The onus now falls on the Trudeau administration. Are they ready to take action against separatists, or will they still ignore this? In Europe, the chorus for Ukraine's NATO membership is growing. And not just that, Eastern European nations might be ready to put boots on the ground if needed. That's the message from a former chief of NATO. In Pakistan, there's a new player entering the political fray, the Istikam-e-Pakistan party. It is made up of former members of Imran Khan's party. Will this new party sideline the former Prime Minister? And New York has become one of the most polluted cities in the world. We'll tell you why. I'm Akanksha Swaroop, filling in for Palki Sharma. The headlines first. Kremlin fumes after a blast on a key ammonia pipeline, warns of negative effect on the Ukraine grain deal. Moscow blames Ukrainian sabotage group for the attack. For Russia to continue with the grain deal, it wants its ammonia exports through the pipeline to resume. Fierce fighting is on at a military site in Sudan. The army and paramilitary forces battle to gain control of a military facility in Khartoum. This comes after the paramilitary claimed control of the Yarmouk weapons manufacturing complex. The deadly conflict in Sudan has been going on since mid-April. China dismisses US accusation that it has failed to stop production of fentanyl. Beijing calls it fake news. China banned the export of the deadly drug to the US in 2019. But US ambassador to China says Chinese firms continue to sell fentanyl in the black market. Has the Taliban banned international NGOs from offering education to out-of-school Afghan children? UNICEF suspects says it will affect 500,000 boys and girls. Since seizing power almost 2 years ago, Taliban have banned girls from secondary schools and universities. And this is no laughing matter. Singapore says sorry to Malaysia. The apology comes after a Singapore-born comedian joked about the disappearance of MH370. This led to a massive outcry in Malaysia. The MH370 disappeared in 2014 with 239 people on board. Our first story tonight is about the India-Canada relationship, one that has seen several ups and downs in recent years. But what's happening now may cause lasting damage. A major controversy has erupted. There was a parade in Ontario. It featured a float. It apparently celebrated the assassination of a former Indian Prime Minister. New Delhi has reacted sharply. What about Canada? There was a statement of condemnation. But it might not be enough considering the indifference of the Trudeau administration towards Indian sensitivities. There are little signs of any change there. Instead, Ottawa seems to be hardening its position. Recently, Canada's National Security Advisor levied a serious charge. She says India is a source of foreign interference in Canada. Seems like both sides are on a collision course. Let's get you the latest. The current source of tensions are these pictures. They are from Brampton in Ontario. This is a Canadian city. A sizable Indian population lives there. But it seems separatists are getting a free run. What happened? This week, there was a parade in Brampton. It featured this tableau. There's a statue of India's former Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi. In a blood-stained white sari, in front of the statue, there are turban-clad men. They are pointing their guns at Gandhi's statue. There's a poster too. It says, revenge. I'm sure some of you have figured this out by now. This tableau is a recreation of Gandhi's assassination. Indira Gandhi was India's Prime Minister, first from 1966 to 1977, then again from 1980 till her death in 1984. She was assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards. The 1980s was a tense period. It witnessed the height of the Khalistan movement, a separatist movement to demand a separate homeland for the Sikhs. There were violent clashes. The Golden Temple in the Indian state of Punjab was stormed. This is one of the most significant shrines for Sikhs. Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, the leader of the Khalistan movement, took refuge in the complex with his supporters. Security forces stormed the temple to clear them out. Yes, I'm talking about Operation Blue Star. Indira Gandhi had authorized it. 2 years later, she was assassinated for giving those orders. Her bodyguards, the assailants, said they took revenge for Operation Blue Star. And that's the scene depicted here. Reports say pro-Khalistanis were behind this float. It was part of a 5-kilometer-long parade. There's no justification for it. It glorifies violence. India's External Affairs Minister issued a strong-worded statement today.
Frankly, to us, we are at a loss to understand, other than the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this. I think there is a larger underlying issue about the space which is given to separatists, to extremists, to people who advocate violence. And I think it's not good for the relationship, and I think it's not good for Canada.
Politicians across party lines have condemned this. They have called it appalling and despicable. Canada's top diplomat in New Delhi spoke out too. He said there is no place in Canada for hate. But like Minister Jaishankar said, this is not a one-off case. Such incidents keep happening and their frequency has only increased under the Trudeau administration. Will things change after these events? A recent statement doesn't inspire confidence. It was made by Jodie Thomas. She is Canada's National Security Advisor. She has said India is among top sources of foreign interference in Canada. Listen to this. She says, when I talk about foreign interference and economic security, I'm now talking about a number of state actors and non-state proxies. This includes Russia, Iran, India. Thomas didn't say what bothers her, but it is unlikely that the issue of separatism and Khalistan doesn't figure in these conversations. There's another friction point. Indian students in Canada. Reports say Canada has some concerns about this. About what? Study permits and slow action by Canadian authorities to grant them. Ottawa believes this might open doors for interference. A controversy on the same issue is playing out right now. This is about 700 Indian students in Canada. Most of them are from the Indian state of Punjab. They are facing deportation. They had received offers of admission from Canadian institutions. It turns out these letters were fake. Minister Jaishankar was asked about this today. He said the Canadian system is fair and they have to find a solution to the problem. Remains to be seen where this will go, but the friction points in this relationship are clearly visible now. Speaking of tense relationships, let's now look at the NATO. Cracks seem to be appearing in NATO's united front. There seems to be two distinct factions emerging. On one side are the Eastern European nations. They're determined to see Ukraine join the alliance. The nations are informally known as the Bucharest Nine. Leaders of the Bucharest Nine met in Slovakia's capital, Bratislava, on Tuesday. They were joined by NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. The Eastern European nations had one demand. Ukraine needs to become part of NATO as soon as possible.
It is also clear that Ukraine should really become member of NATO. The question is when, and the answer is shortly or immediately after the war. Because only the full membership, not a half membership, but only the full membership of NATO can guarantee the peace in Ukraine and guarantee the peace in Europe.
Ukraine cannot be left in the gray zone anymore. We cannot risk a war in Europe again. Of course, we expect Sweden to become NATO member before we all meet in Vilnius. I have a strong feeling that it is still possible to achieve. I also have a special plea to allies to complete the process of ratification. There's no reason to stall the process right now. Let us unite our efforts so that 32 countries can sit at the NATO table in Vilnius.
The promises we make should also be kept. We have to give perspective for Ukraine's membership application to the NATO. And in order to be able to move forward in that sense, we have to see the soonest end to the war conflict in Ukraine.
It seems the Bucharest Nine are upping the stakes. The former head of NATO and current advisor to Zelensky, Anders Rasmussen, has issued an ultimatum. He said Ukraine needs security guarantees and a membership path at the next NATO summit. The summit will begin on July 11th in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. Rasmussen said if these steps aren't taken, there will be an escalation. He said Poland and the Baltic nations might take matters into their own hands. How? By sending their own troops into Ukraine. Yes, NATO members are apparently threatening to send their soldiers into the war zone. It would mark a huge escalation and risk direct involvement of NATO troops in Ukraine. Remember, NATO follows the principle of collective defense. An attack on one member is an attack on all. So what happens if Russia kills NATO member country soldiers while attacking Ukraine? Rasmussen's threat is being seen as a pressure tactic, a way to arm twist the other faction in NATO, the cautious faction. This includes Germany and the US. They are reportedly still wary about letting Ukraine join the alliance too soon. It could serve to anger Russia further. Current NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg seems to be attempting a fine balancing act. He made these two statements in Bratislava.
All allies agree that NATO's door remains open, that Ukraine will become a member of NATO, and that this is a decision that only allies and Ukraine can make. Russia does not have a right to veto NATO enlargement. At the B9 meeting today, we prepared a NATO summit, which will take place in Vilnius in July. At that summit, I expect allies to agree a multi-year package of assistance so that Ukraine transitions from Soviet-era doctrines, training and equipment to NATO standards, and to help it move closer to the alliance.
On one hand, he said Russia does not have the right to veto a NATO enlargement. On the other, he spoke of a multi-year assistance package, something to help Ukraine move closer to the alliance. He did not commit to Ukraine immediately joining NATO. Then yesterday, he said NATO must give security assurances to Ukraine when the war ends. Assurances, not membership. He also reiterated that NATO will provide full-fledged security guarantees to full members only. It's this kind of cautious approach that's making the Eastern European nations angry. It threatens to divide NATO. The US seems to have noticed the tense situation.
The President will welcome Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, to the White House on Monday, June 12th, to discuss the upcoming NATO summit that's going to be occurring in Lithuania. President Biden and Secretary General Stoltenberg will review preparations for the summit, including the work to further strengthen allied deterrence and defense, build on the 2014 Wales Summit Defense Investment Pledge, and deepen NATO's partnership. They will also discuss ally support for Ukraine in the face of Russia's brutal war of aggression.
So will Washington give in to Eastern Europe's pressure, or will it stick with a cautious approach? We'll bring you more on this story as it develops. America's influence is being tested on another front: currency. The de-dollarization campaign. It's a real thing now. Even American banks can't ignore it. JP Morgan, it is one of America's leading banks. The bank has recognized that the domination of the dollar is under threat. The bank has put out an assessment. Listen to this. Some signs of de-dollarization are emerging. This trend is likely to persist. That's what JP Morgan said. The bank believes there is no near-term threat to the greenback's domination. But there is a clear trend developing. Listen to this now. Again, This is from the same JP Morgan assessment. It says de-dollarization is evident in FX reserves, where USD share has declined to a record. FX is foreign exchange reserves, the money that central banks around the world keep in their reserves. We have covered the reasons for that in the past as well. The international sanctions and the restrictions on trade. Countries are trying to find new ways. They want to work outside the current system, which is dominated by the dollar. Usually, that means trading in their native currencies. China has been pushing the yuan for bilateral trade. India too has an arrangement with Russia, the rupee-ruble mechanism. India and Russia are using their own currencies to make payments. Instead of the dollar or the euro, alternative currencies are just one aspect of this trend. Central banks are stocking up on gold too. 2022 was a record year for gold purchases. Last year, central banks bought over 1,000 metric tons of gold, the highest since record keeping began in 1950. So which central banks are behind the surge in gold purchases? Again, some familiar names top the charts: Russia, China and India. Central banks in these countries are beefing up their gold stocks. But how big are these reserves? What do the numbers say? I have some data. Earlier, gold had an 11% share in central bank reserves. Now this number has shot up to 15%. So there's an increase, but the dollar still remains dominant. 58% of the reserves with central banks around the world are of the greenback. This is a 20-year low, and despite that, more than half of the reserves are in the dollar. What should we make of this? In the short term, the dollar is still king. But foundations are being laid for a shift. The BRICS is leading the charge on this front. BRICS is an alliance of nations, and I'm talking about Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. These are leading emerging economies, and they're thinking about making some bold moves. Recently, their foreign ministers met. They discussed the idea of a shared currency. The proposal was first floated by Russia. This happened during last year's BRICS summit. Now, the BRICS has sought some guidance.
We had one of the senior executives of the new development bank briefing our meeting on work that the bank has been doing, looking at the potential use of alternative currencies to the current internationally traded currencies, and looking at how we strengthen the arm of the BRICS Development Bank, and also ensure that we do not become victim to sanctions.
So serious deliberations are underway, but a shared currency is not an easy idea to execute. There's a need for direction and a roadmap. The specifics could be spelled out later this year, when leaders of BRICS nations meet in August for a summit. South Africa is playing host. We'll be tracking the developments for you. Now let's shift focus to Pakistan. It seems Pakistani politics is set to welcome a new player, the Istekam-e-Pakistan party. It was announced amid some fanfare. Who are the members of this new party? Mostly former Prime Minister Imran Khan's one-time loyalists. Yes, the new party is made up of former Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party leaders. The head will be Jahangir Khan Tareen, or JKT. He's a former lawmaker and a billionaire sugar baron. Reportedly one of Pakistan's richest politicians too. He's also a man Imran Khan had personally appointed as PTI Secretary General. A lot of other former PTI leaders were present during the party's announcement. Fawad Chaudhry, Ali Zaidi, Mahmood Maulvi and more were present for the celebration. These are people who had defected from the PTI after May 9. That's when violence had erupted across Pakistan. It followed Imran Khan's arrest. The violence eventually spread to military buildings. And after that, one by one, the PTI leaders started jumping ship. They resigned, saying they respected and stood with the Pakistani army. Most also said they were taking a break from politics. It seems that break didn't last long. In the recent weeks, frantic meetings have been conducted. The former PTI members have been meeting their old colleagues. Those colleagues locked up in prisons. We reported on this recently. We also mentioned that Imran Khan was watching this scheme, the scheme being called Minus Imran. Khan had said a new King's Party was being formed. Well, it seems the King's party has been coronated, crowned with the name Istikam-e-Pakistan. Imran Khan believes this party is being propped up by the Pakistani army, that the military establishment has been coercing his party members to abandon him.
It is completely the establishment. I mean, establishment obviously means the military establishment, because they are really now openly, I mean, it's not even hidden now, they're just out in the open. The threats now and two of my senior members went to called by the ISI for talks, who had nominated for talks. And when they went, they shut them up and said, look, you'll only leave unless you renounce being part of PTI.
He put out this translated WhatsApp message a few days ago. It purportedly shows the immense pressure being applied to engineer what he calls forced divorces. Now it seems Khan's estranged partners have gotten together to take him down. But Khan won't be surprised. After all, the new party was expected. It's a tried and tested gambit in Pakistani politics. For now, Khan has secured bail in the case for 14 days. But it seems Imran Khan's problems just keep piling up. Another case has been filed against the former Prime Minister. This time it's quite grave. It's an abetment to murder case. The Pakistani police say Khan is involved in the murder of a lawyer who filed a sedition case against him. Abdur Razak was killed on Tuesday by unknown gunmen on a motorcycle. Razak's son, Siraj Ahmed, has linked the murderers to Imran Khan. How Khan is linked hasn't been made public as yet. Khan, of course, denies it. He keeps blaming the establishment.
उस आदमी का वकील का कत्ल होता है, फैमिली सारी कहती है कि खानदानी दुश्मनी थी, उस पर कत्ल हुआ है, वहां पहुंच जाते हैं, यानी वो पता चलता है कोई 9:30 बजे उसका कत्ल होता है, 4 घंटे के अंदर लॉ मिनिस्टर प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस कर देता है कि इमरान खान इसमें मुलव्वस था। 4 घंटे। कभी सोचे हैं कि कोई कत्ल हुआ है, कोई इन्वेस्टिगेशन होती है, कोई पता चलता है, वो 4 घंटे में कहता है इमरान खान इसके अंदर मुलव्वस है। और उसके बाद क्या होता है? उसके बाद आईजी उठाता है उसके बेटे को, रात तक आईजी उसको अपने पास रखता है, और उससे फिर एक और स्टेटमेंट आ जाती है कि जी ये इमरान खान ने कत्ल करवाया मेरे बाप को।
Officials say Khan could face formal charges if and when the murder case goes to trial. The charges would become part of a very long list. And now let's talk about Pakistan's iron brother, China. It is making more provocative moves. In recent days, we have witnessed 2 close calls. First, a Chinese fighter flew dangerously close to a US spy plane. Then 2 warships almost collided. Again, this confrontation was with an American warship. And today, China dispatched its jets again. This time, the target was Taiwan. 37 Chinese planes flew into the island's air defense zone. What's an air defense zone? It is like a border in the skies. If any plane enters this area, then they need to identify them. Otherwise, the plane would be seen as hostile. Today, China sent 37 military planes into this area. What kind of planes were these? The J-11 and J-16 fighters and nuclear-capable H-6 bombers. All these planes can't just be going to say hello. They are trying to threaten Taiwan. Taipei responded in kind. It activated its defense systems and sent its own aircraft and ships to track China's warplanes. These moves are not new. The Chinese military often undertakes such flights. These are pressure tactics. They're designed to remind Taipei how quickly the PLA can reach the island. This is China's way of keeping the threat of an invasion alive. Xi Jinping has not ruled it out. He has vowed to take Taiwan by force if necessary. What's different this time is the intensity. The PLA is stepping up its activities in the region. The reason is the United States. The US military is stepping up drills. It is also helping Taiwan enhance its capabilities. Today, a new arrangement was announced. US, Taiwan and Japan will now share data from their drones. The data will be shared in real time. from the naval reconnaissance drones of the three parties. What is the purpose of this arrangement? To keep an eye on Chinese activities in these waters. US has roped in its allies to strengthen Taiwan's defenses. So in the event of any Chinese attack, US and Japan will be able to coordinate their actions. They'll be able to collect intelligence and inform Taipei about the PLA's movements. Soon, Taiwan will be receiving 4 new drones. They are MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones. They'll be delivered to Taipei by 2025. So what kind of capabilities does it have? It can track, find and target enemy ships and radars. Washington feels the need to bolster its defenses now. It believes China is increasingly getting aggressive in the region.
Sadly, Ed, these are part and parcel of an increasing level of aggressiveness by the PLA, the PRC's military, particularly in the area of the Taiwan Straits and in the South China Sea. The air intercept was over the South China Sea, and the maritime intercept that you talk about was in the Straits. And sadly, this is just part, again, of a growing aggressiveness by the PRC that we're dealing with, and we're prepared to address it.
China issued a response today as well. It accused the US and Japan of creating military tensions and threatening stability in the Taiwan Strait. But it is unlikely the US and its allies will back down. If China intensifies its operations near Taiwan, expect America and its friends to respond in kind. Donald Trump is an ambitious man. He was defeated by Joe Biden in 2020, but he wants to return to power. Donald Trump wants to be president of the United States again. But his road to glory is riddled with obstacles. Not direct obstacles that could prevent him from running for president, but legal troubles that could hurt his electoral fortunes. Could legal cases motivate Trump supporters to switch sides? Or will Trump be successful convincing Republican voters that he's a victim of political vendetta? Remember, Donald Trump is the leading candidate within the Republican Party. He has the support of close to 50% Republicans. Ron DeSantis comes second with just about 19% support. It's a one-man match right now. But could the legal cases turn the tables against Trump? Our next report gets you the answers.
Can a criminal become the president of the United States of America? Surprisingly, yes. As per the law, there's no stopping a convicted person from running for the White House. So if Donald Trump were to be jailed in any of the criminal cases going on against him, he could still become president. But this story is not about him becoming president after being convicted of crimes. It's about Trump's growing legal troubles. And there's no doubt, Trump's mountain of legal challenges is only getting bigger. Here's the latest one. United States prosecutors have informed Trump's lawyers that he is the target of a probe. Which probe? The one looking into the saga of classified documents being found at Trump's Florida residence. Among all the legal battles that Trump finds himself in, the one relating to the classified documents is the most severe. Expectedly, Trump didn't like the news, so he did what he knows best. He took to his social media platform to vent. Here's what he said on Truth Social. No one has told me I'm being indicted, and I shouldn't be because I've done nothing wrong. Reports say the special counsel investigating Trump could announce possible criminal charges in the coming days or weeks. This is standard practice. The Justice Department generally informs all of its targets that they are being looked into. This gives them a chance to prepare the defense. Also, this doesn't necessarily mean that Trump will be charged, but the odds certainly seem stacked against him. The Justice Department is apparently in possession of an audio recording, because Trump can allegedly be heard acknowledging that he kept a classified Pentagon document, a document which talks about a potential attack on Iran. There's more. Last year, the FBI seized some 11,000 documents from Trump's residence, Mar-a-Lago. About 100 of these documents were termed classified, and some were even labeled top secret. So now Trump is in a precarious situation. He could face a host of charges, including obstruction of justice and perhaps even under the stringent Espionage Act. And the former president isn't helping his case with his remarks. In a recent CNN town hall, Trump declared, "I took the documents, I'm allowed to, I have the absolute right to do whatever I want with them." Apart from the battle over documents, Trump faces a number of other criminal investigations. These relate to Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, his role in the storming of the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and also his attempt to overturn Joe Biden's election victory in the state of Georgia. Trump has already made history in US courts, but not the way he would have liked. In April, he became the first former president to face criminal charges. A Manhattan district attorney charged Donald Trump with 34 counts of felony. These relate to him falsifying business records. Trump allegedly made hush money payments to a porn star to buy her silence.
Safely and peacefully.
All of this might make you think Donald Trump can't win the US presidency again, but let's not jump to conclusions just yet. After all, this is a man who has defied odds in the past, most notably with his 2016 election victory. Even now, Trump is the leading contender within the Republican Party by a wide margin. Almost 49% GOP primary voters back Donald Trump. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is a distant second with just 90% support. Meanwhile, Mike Pence has 5% backing, while Nikki Haley just 4%. In fact, the growing number of contenders are giving a sure shot edge to Trump to win the Republican ticket. So far, his legal troubles seem to have no impact on his political fortunes. In fact, Trump is hoping that these cases galvanize his support base. The road to the White House for Trump is one littered with lawsuits. Will he actually reach his destination? We will have to wait until November next year to find out.
North America is burning. Millions of acres of land in Canada has been reduced to ashes. Canada is struggling to control wildfires that have now spread across the country. And these wildfires are the worst Canada has ever seen. So the impact has been quite catastrophic, not just for Canada, but also its southern neighbor and close friend, the United States. Cities in the US have been turned into smoke chambers. Perhaps the worst hit is the world's Big Apple, New York City. It is now one of the most polluted cities in the world. The air quality in New York is now more hazardous than in New Delhi. USA's biggest cities suddenly find themselves breathing the proverbial third world air. Here's a report.
Americans find themselves in a hazardous situation, quite literally, because the air has been polluted like never before. New York City now has the world's most polluted air. Take a look at this. These are not scenes from some apocalyptic film. This is what New York City looks like. Now imagine living in this city. If you're watching this report from Delhi, you know what breathing this air feels like. But at least the air in Delhi doesn't turn orange. This is what the George Washington Bridge looks like now, or whatever part of it is still visible. For somebody who doesn't have the proper context, you'd probably think New York has been the victim of an unprecedented sandstorm. Or worse, been struck by a biological weapon that has made the air toxic. Now, while New York and many other American cities do look like apocalyptic ghost towns, life must go on. With all necessary precautions, of course.
I've been advising people where possible, stay inside. Even though the air outside will ultimately find its way inside, the levels will be reduced. Also, this is not the time to be playing tennis or jogging or getting ready for a marathon. Go easy on your lungs. Don't do anything that requires deep, heavy breathing. Maybe better to walk versus bicycle if you can, just to keep things light.
Go easy on your lungs. That's the message from authorities. Just to give you an idea of how things spiraled out of control in a matter of days, on June 3rd, the air quality index of New York was 15. Now it's hovering anywhere between 350 to 500. And that's over 56 times higher than the World Health Organization's safety limit. You'd think we're singling New York out, but this is not the case. After all, smoke coming out of Canada is hovering over northeastern US and the Midwest. Places like Wisconsin, Syracuse, and Minnesota haven't been spared either. Let's talk about Canada for a bit. The situation in this North American country is dire. Canada is battling its severest wildfire season on record. Over 8.2 million acres of land have already been burned. At this very moment, there are about 400 active wildfires still raging in Canada. And more than a half of them have been declared out of control. Over 12,700 square miles of forest and land has been destroyed. It's the sheer scale of the crisis in Canada that's sending ripple waves across the American continent. Smoke emanating from wildfires can be very toxic. This is due to the presence of particles called PM 2.5. Any particles with a diameter of less than 2.5 micrometers fits this category. Do you know why these particles are dangerous? Because they're able to get past our natural defenses. These are small enough to enter our lungs from where they can start flowing in the bloodstream. These particles can cause irritation in the eyes, nose, throat, and lungs. But they can also trigger more severe conditions like asthma attacks. Breathing such air can have a number of detrimental effects. But Americans can breathe easy knowing that this is a temporary situation and not an all-year-round phenomenon. The same can't be said for many Asian cities.
Annecy. It's an idyllic town in the south of France, nicknamed the Pearl of the French Alps. But today, the town woke up to a horrific incident, a mass stabbing attack. 6 victims, including 4 children. The victims are as young as 3 years old. That's the latest. So let's talk about how the attack took place. It was around 9:45 a.m. local time. Children were playing at a playground, one located near the town's famous lake. This is when a man armed with a knife entered this playground. Disclaimer alert, the details get gory from here. He began to stab a group of children as young as 3. Witnesses describe people running, crying, panicking.
Now it will take time until parents again take their children to playgrounds, since I think the trauma will stay forever in the town of Annecy, because this is the first time this has ever happened here, as far as I know. But now things like this will happen again in places that we don't expect. That's what will happen. Everyone expects this to happen in big cities like Marseille, Paris or Lyon, but now the target will be places where no one expects it, to put fear into people.
I would like to reiterate how terrified we are as people of Annecy, as French people, at this appalling attack on young children under the age of 2, just a few years old, in the heart of Annecy, in the historic Pacquiao Garden. It was an attack on humanity that took place this morning, an attack on our very soul, where young children playing outside school hours were attacked by an individual.
He then ran from that scene, attacking another man who was walking nearby. It was at this point that the police intervened. They quickly overpowered him. Reports suggest he was shot in the legs. Soon, he was arrested at the scene. In fact, the Interior Minister tweeted about the arrest, lauding the rapid reaction of security forces. Police have confirmed that the man is a 31-year-old Syrian who had refugee status in Sweden. The mayor of Annecy called it an appalling attack. French President Emmanuel Macron has denounced the stabbing on Twitter, calling it an act of absolute cowardice. The National Parliament too observed a minute's silence for the victims. For the town of Annecy, it was a moment of shock, a moment of horror. This is a town people go to a vacation. Many of them can't even imagine such an incident. But France is no stranger to these attacks. 2015, the attack on the Charlie Hebdo magazine, 12 people killed. 2015 again, the Paris attacks, the deadliest attacks in the history of France. 130 people killed. 2016, the Bastille Day attacks in Nice, 84 people killed. 2017 stabbing incident in Marseille, 2 women killed. 2020, another attack in a Paris suburb. The beheading of a teacher in broad daylight. 2022, a shooting incident in Paris, 3 killed, 3 others injured. And lastly, in January of 2023, another stabbing incident, that too at a Paris station. I know the list sounds long, almost never ending, but this is one of France's biggest problems right now. Islamist attacks and threats they can't counter. Homegrown terrorism is a huge worry for France, one that's fueling anti-migration sentiments in the country. Many of these attackers belong to migrant communities or those seeking asylum in the country. Some of them were French citizens but felt they were excluded from the French society. Experts have said it is unfair to blame immigration for the attacks. But for French right wing, this has been the perfect lightning rod. In fact, far-right leader Marine Le Pen blamed African migrants for crime in France. She called them a threat to French civilization. And a majority of France's population agrees. Data suggests immigrants account for a little over 10% of the population, around 7 million people. But the debate around them is far outsized. In fact, the government recently brought in a controversial bill, one that tries to deal with anti-immigration. The bill says it aims to control immigration while improving integration. But what it allows is greater deportation, especially for foreigners who commit crimes. Many slam it as racist, aiming to criminalize immigrants. It is still not sure how France will react to this attack, but it may reignite the anti-immigration debate. The attack is currently not being linked to terrorism. The French police are yet to confirm anything, and the details are still trickling in. What do you do when you are applying for a new job? You check the job requirements, the pay, the commute, maybe even consider job satisfaction. But what if the office gets back to you with a bizarre request, like only vegan lunches allowed? What do you do then? A job seeker faced the same dilemma. They were in for a rude shock when they got a mail from the potential employer. What did the reply say? Watch our next report to find out. Be on time. Understand your office environment. Respect others. Be polite and professional. Those are some of the usual rules that most offices have. Sounds normal, right? But what if your office had this rule? Vegan lunches only on site. Shocked, right? So was this Reddit user who posted about it. This is a mail he got from a potential employer. It says, and I quote, "Our workplaces are strictly vegan. You do not have to be vegan away from work, but you do need to bring a vegan lunch and have plant milk to eat on site or eat lunch off site. Can you confirm you are fine with this?" So basically, if they took the job, he would have to have only vegan food at work. Sounds bizarre, right? In fact, the post has divided the internet. Some believe it is fair for the company to do so. They argue that since the company asked first, it doesn't violate any employee clauses. They believe if a workplace wants to be vegan, they should be allowed to do so. The other side finds it radical. They believe no job is worth this much hassle. According to them, it is a stupid rule. But this isn't the first time office rules have divided the internet. Here's another one. It says work 10 minutes extra for every 1 minute that you are late. I mean, punctuality is a good trait, but this seems to have taken it a bit too far, and the internet agrees. How about this? A bathroom sign that said, employees must adhere to the time limit or face a smell check. Imagine that. An office that dictates how much time you spend in the loo. Of course, the internet was outraged. Bizarre office rules may be an anomaly, but they sure are creative. And if you think your job pays you well enough to only eat greens for a meal, go ahead and accept it. Or else keep looking. Preferably for ones which don't create unrest over your use of the restroom. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. India has successfully tested a new generation ballistic missile. It's called Agni Prime. Meanwhile, wildfires in Canada are severely impacting parts of the United States. New Yorkers woke up to a hazy day that looked like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. And the Kilauea volcano erupted in Hawaii. This is one of the world's most active volcanoes. And finally, what makes June 8th significant? On this day in 1948, Air India's first international flight took off. It took off from erstwhile Bombay for London via Cairo and Geneva. Air India International came into being after industrialist J.R.D. Tata suggested that the Indian government should sponsor an international airline. We leave you with that. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.